Some messages aren't meant to be delivered, but sometimes they arrive anyway. Imagine checking your mailbox and finding a letter from someone you buried years ago. The handwriting is unmistakable, the details inside are personal, and the message, it knows too much about your life now, about what's coming next. In this episode, we explore 5 bone-chilling true accounts of letters from the dead. Whether they came with warnings, confessions, or impossible knowledge, each of these messages left their recipients haunted and changed forever. Story 1. The Return Address. When the letter arrived, there was nothing unusual about it at first glance. A plain white envelope, no stamps, no postmark, just her name, Claire Montrose, typed neatly in block letters, and a return address printed on the back in a faded, familiar scrawl. 1248 Sycamore Drive. Claire stared at the return address for a long time. That was the house she grew up in. The house her family sold 15 years ago, just after the fire that had killed her older sister, Emily. Claire had moved on, or at least convinced herself she had. She now lived in a quiet neighborhood in Pennsylvania, worked as a librarian, and rarely thought about Sycamore Drive anymore. The house had burned during her freshman year of college. Her parents had insisted on moving far away, trying to forget the tragedy. Emily had been 17. No one ever figured out how the fire started. But this envelope, this impossible letter, had her sister's handwriting on it. Not typed, not forged, not similar. It was exactly the way Emily had written when they were teenagers, the little swirl at the end of her Y's, the slanted E's. Claire opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no date. Open quote, "You weren't supposed to see what was in the crawl space, but since you did, I'm sorry. Be careful when you dream. They live there now." Close quote, that was all. Claire dropped the letter. Her mouth went dry. The crawl space. Only one person could have known about that, Emily. It wasn't something they ever told anyone. They used to sneak in through a panel behind the laundry machine, crawling into the cramped, dusty darkness with flashlights and comic books. It had been their secret spot for years. But 1 week before the fire, Emily had gone in alone and come out pale, shaking, refusing to say what she saw. She never set foot near it again. Claire had mostly blocked out that memory, or thought she had. She didn't sleep much that night. 2 days later, she called the current owner of the Sycamore house under the pretense of being a former resident writing a memoir. The woman, polite but curt, told her the house had been remodeled after the fire. Yes, there was still a crawl space, though it had been sealed off during renovations. She didn't seem eager to discuss it. That evening, Claire received another letter. No envelope this time, just the page, folded, sitting on her kitchen counter when she came home from work. The doors had been locked, the windows closed. Open quote, "It's not just dreams anymore. I hear them moving, at night, under the house. You need to tell Mom. Tell her I didn't want this. Tell her it wasn't me who started the fire." Close quote. Claire sat down on the floor and cried. She hadn't spoken to her mother in years. After Emily's death, their family fractured. Her parents were never the same. Her mom grew cold, brittle. Her dad drank himself into silence. But reading that note, there was a panic in it, a desperation. It sounded like her sister. Not just the handwriting, but the voice. Later that night, Claire dreamed of the crawl space. In the dream, she was 8 again. Emily was there, beckoning her toward the narrow opening. "They're waiting," Emily whispered. "You brought them with you when you left." Claire peered into the darkness and saw eyes. So many eyes, blinking, watching. She woke up screaming. The next morning, Claire booked a ticket back to her hometown. She rented a car at the airport and drove to Sycamore Drive. The house looked wrong. She'd expected that. New siding, fresh paint, the lawn was overgrown, a gutter hung loosely near the roof. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like something hiding. The woman who now owned the house wasn't there. Claire walked around to the back. The old crawlspace entrance had been replaced by concrete. Still, something pulled her toward it. She sat on the ground, touching the cool cement. "I know what you saw," she whispered, not sure to whom she was speaking. Then she heard it. Scraping from underneath. She scrambled back, but there was nothing visible. No crack, no hole, just the sound, low, dry, like something clawing against earth and wood. She fled. That night in the hotel, another letter waited for her inside her room. Open quote, "Mom knew. She made me go in there. She said it was the only way to fix it, but they didn't want her. They took me instead. Don't trust her. She called them. She always heard the whispers. That's why she locked the door behind me." Close quote. Claire's hands trembled. Her mother had always been superstitious. Ritual candles, dream journals, old books in strange languages she kept hidden. But Claire never imagined it went deeper than eccentricity. The next day, Claire drove to her mother's assisted living facility. When she entered, her mother looked up, surprised. "Claire?" she said softly. "You never visit." Claire didn't waste time. She placed the letters on the table between them. Her mother went pale. "You weren't supposed to read those," she said. "Who wrote them, Mom?" Claire demanded. Her mother stared at her, lips pressed tight. Then, "They're not letters, not exactly. They're anchors. Sometimes the veil thins and they find ways to speak. Not everyone can hear them, but you and Emily, you always could." Claire wanted to scream. "You locked her in there." "I was trying to stop them," her mother whispered. "She was the price. I didn't choose her. They did, but it worked. The house was quiet for years after. I paid in full." Claire stood up. "You're sick." Her mother only nodded. "They'll come for you next. You touched the seal. You went back. You heard them." Claire left. Back home, things changed quickly. Strange smells in her apartment. Burnt wood, wet soil, electronics flickering, whispers in the vents. Always the same voice. "Tell her the truth, or we will." The last letter arrived 2 weeks later. It wasn't on paper. It was carved into her bedroom wall. Open quote, "Return what was taken." Close quote. That night, the lights in her apartment failed. The mirrors turned black, and beneath her bed, something began to crawl. Story 2. The Wedding Invitation. When Claire Marsh opened the mailbox of her suburban Chicago apartment one breezy October morning, the last thing she expected to find was a crisp, cream-colored envelope with gold-embossed calligraphy spelling out her full name. It wasn't the invitation itself that unsettled her. It was the return address. Rose Hill Cemetery, Lot 43A. Her hands trembled as she slid a finger under the flap. Inside was a beautifully designed wedding invitation, the kind you'd expect from a lavish country club affair. The names on the card stopped her heart cold. "You are cordially invited to the union of Daniel and Claire Marsh." The date listed was October 31st, just 2 weeks away. The venue? Rose Hill Cemetery, under the marble arch by the Weeping Angel statue. Daniel Marsh was her husband, or had been. He died in a car accident 3 years ago to the day. At first, Claire thought it was some kind of sick joke. She called her sister Emily, who was equally disturbed, but suggested it could be an elaborate Halloween prank, or maybe something tied to the grief support group Claire had been part of. But Claire wasn't convinced. Daniel's death had been public. So had her devastation. But no one else knew about the nickname Weeping Angel. It was a private spot in the cemetery where she had buried a time capsule for him on the first anniversary of his passing. Claire didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, she brought the invitation to the police. The officer on duty examined the envelope and assured her that, while eerie, no crime had been committed. "Probably a prank," he said, handing it back with a shrug. But Claire noticed something strange. The ink from the names on the card had smeared onto his thumb. It wasn't ink, it was ash. As the days ticked down to October 31st, Claire received more envelopes, 5 in total. Each had no postage, but appeared in her mailbox or slid under her apartment door. One included a photo of Daniel on their wedding day. Only the background had changed. Instead of the reception hall, behind them stood a row of headstones. Another envelope held a pressed lily, the flower she had placed in his coffin. By the night before Halloween, Claire was unraveling. She began to wonder if the trauma of his loss had finally cracked her reality. But when she looked through her wedding album, she noticed something chilling. The photos had changed. Not all of them, but in every image where Daniel stood alone, there was now a faint silhouette behind him. A tall, slender figure with hollow eyes and a permanent grin. On Halloween morning, Claire resolved to go to the cemetery. Whether it was a cruel prank, a hallucination, or something worse, she needed closure. Dressed in black, she drove to Rose Hill with the original invitation in her coat pocket. The air was crisp, the leaves brittle under her feet as she followed the narrow gravel path to the Weeping Angel statue. She wasn't alone. A man stood beneath the arch, facing away from her. His posture, his build, it was identical to Daniel's. For a moment, her breath caught and she whispered his name. The figure turned slightly, and Claire saw his face. It was Daniel, older than he had been when he died, with sunken cheeks and eyes that glowed faintly gray. "Claire," he said softly, his voice familiar but layered with something hollow. "You came." She could barely speak. "How is this happening?" He reached into his coat and pulled out another envelope. "The last invitation," he said. "You can choose to stay or return." Claire's heart pounded. "Return where?" He didn't answer. Instead, he took her hand. It was cold but not icy, solid but not alive. "I never wanted to leave," he whispered, "but you did." Tears welled in her eyes. "I had to. You were gone." Daniel's smile faded. "No, I was waiting." At that moment, a sharp wind blew through the cemetery. Claire staggered back, breaking his grip. When she looked up again, he was gone. In his place was a small wooden box, her time capsule, the one she buried a year after his death. Hands trembling, she opened it. Inside was the original wedding photo, untouched, unaltered, and a final letter. The handwriting was Daniel's, but the date was the day after his funeral. "Claire, if this reaches you, I need you to know I tried. Wherever I am, I love you. But something followed me into the dark. I thought I escaped it, but now it wants you too. Please don't come back here. Burn the letters. Forget the invitation." Claire collapsed beside the capsule, clutching the letter. Her sobs echoed through the quiet graveyard. She burned the remaining envelopes that night. She deleted the altered photos, and over time, they stopped changing. But she never forgot that Halloween. She never received another letter. But sometimes, when walking past a mailbox or hearing the soft rustle of paper at night, she still flinches. Not out of fear of receiving something, but fear of what she might send back. Story 3, The Tattooed Letter. Travis Juneau was a tattoo artist known for two things: his impeccable line work and his obsession with the obscure. His parlor, Black Vein Inc., nestled in the heart of Portland, Oregon, was a collage of vintage occult books, Victorian medical diagrams, and antique letters displayed under glass. Most people thought it was just part of his aesthetic, but the truth ran deeper. Travis collected stories. Specifically, stories of people who claimed to receive letters from the dead. He'd found them in flea markets, thrift shops, old mailboxes, even taped to gravestones. Some were hoaxes, no doubt. Others were inexplicably personal, eerily prescient, or downright chilling. But none of them stayed with him like the one he received on the morning of February 9th. It arrived with no postage, no return address. Just his name, Travis Juneau, typed in courier font across a pale gray envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed like it had aged in a damp drawer. Typed on it was a short message: "What you lost in skin, you'll gain in ink. Come find me." At the bottom was a string of numbers and letters that at first seemed like gibberish. Lot 82, LW 1927, a promise beneath the veil. Travis wasn't frightened. He was intrigued. It sounded like a riddle or an invitation, maybe an urban explorer playing a game. He Googled the combination. Lot 82 sounded like a cemetery plot. LW could be initials. 1927, a year. The phrase "a promise beneath the veil" felt poetic, but also haunting. He posted the image of the letter to an online forum for paranormal researchers. Within an hour, someone messaged him privately. "Rose Hill Cemetery. Lot 82 belongs to Lydia Winslow. Died 1927. Her tombstone reads, 'A promise beneath the veil.'" Rose Hill, again. Same cemetery that had popped up in other dead letter stories he'd archived. He cleared his appointments for the next day and drove there with the letter in his glove compartment and a notebook full of half-drawn ideas for a memorial tattoo. Lydia Winslow's grave was exactly where the forum user had said. Her headstone was elegant, white marble, partially eroded but still legible. And sure enough, just beneath her name, "A promise beneath the veil." As Travis knelt beside the grave, something pricked at his senses, like being watched. He scanned the area. Nothing. Just dead leaves and wind. But when he stood up, something caught his eye. Behind the tombstone, hidden by an overgrowth of ivy, was a small rusted box, half buried. He dug it out with bare hands, brushed off the dirt, and opened it. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, a brittle envelope, and a photograph of a young woman, Lydia, presumably, with dark eyes, half-lidded in a way that felt both sleepy and knowing. The letter inside was written in a looping, elegant hand. "To whoever finds this, you have been chosen. If the message reached you, then ink is your blood and curiosity your curse. My name is Lydia Winslow, And I am not resting. I am waiting. I've etched a piece of myself where no one can see, inked into flesh, forgotten by time. Find the mark, and you'll find me. But beware, once the ink awakens, it doesn't fade, it consumes. Beneath the signature was a strange sigil, an angular symbol that looked like an eye being stitched shut. Travis took the photo, the letter, and the box home with him. That night, he couldn't sleep. Something about Lydia's words lodged into his mind. Inked into flesh. What did that mean? The next morning, he woke with a burning sensation on his right shoulder blade. He twisted to look in the mirror and froze. There was a tattoo on his back, a fresh one, perfect lines, deep black ink. The sigil from Lydia's letter. He hadn't done it. No one else had access to his body. He lived alone. There were no bandages, no scabbing, just a new, perfect tattoo that hadn't been there the day before. At first, he tried to rationalize it. Sleepwalking, a blackout. Maybe he had tattooed himself during some kind of episode. But deep down, he knew that wasn't the case. The lines were too clean, too precise. Not something that could be done without mirrors, and not on a half-asleep body. The next day, it got stranger. He woke to find another piece added to the tattoo, an ornate key, its teeth twisting into a floral pattern. Again, perfectly done. Again, with no recollection. And then came the dreams. They were vivid, too real to dismiss. In them, Lydia stood beneath a veil of moth-eaten lace, whispering backwards in a voice like glass breaking underwater. In each dream, she stepped closer. Her eyes seemed to shimmer, not with light, but with movement. Something crawled beneath her skin, writhing just under the surface. The tattoo continued to grow. By the 5th day, it covered his entire back, an intricate tableau of symbols, names, and phrases in Latin and Old English, all spiraling around the central sigil like worshippers at a shrine. He consulted other tattoo artists. None of them had seen anything like it. One said the ink didn't behave like normal pigment. Under UV light, it pulsed faintly. Another ran a chemical analysis on a sample of the ink he scraped from his own skin. It was composed of iron, carbon, and bone ash. That night, his nose bled for the first time. And again, he dreamed. This time, he stood in front of a mirror that showed not his face, but hers. "Lydia," she whispered, "you're almost done." Travis stopped leaving the house. His skin ached constantly, like the ink was pushing outward, trying to break through. He covered his mirrors. He unplugged his tattoo machines. But the design still grew. He tried to burn the letter. It wouldn't catch. He buried the box again. The next morning, it was on his pillow. On the 7th day, he woke to find the last piece inked over his heart. Her name, Lydia Winslow. And then silence. No dreams, no pain. Just stillness. Until he looked into the mirror. His reflection blinked a second too slow. His mouth didn't move when he spoke. And in his eyes, her shimmer. Travis Juneau still runs Black Vein Ink. Clients say he seems different now. Quieter, more focused. His line work is immaculate, almost inhumanly perfect. But those who receive tattoos from him have reported strange things. Visions, letters, dreams. And sometimes tattoos they never asked for, etched in black, always starting with a sigil, an eye, stitched shut. Story 4, the postmarked photograph. In the summer of 2014, a semi-retired photojournalist named Helen Cartwright moved into a modest cottage on the outskirts of Goffstown, New Hampshire. After years of traveling for newspapers and magazines, Helen had decided to settle down and work on her memoirs. The cottage was small but charming, nestled beside a woodland trail and far enough from town to offer the solitude she'd craved. One foggy Monday morning in early July, Helen walked down her long gravel driveway to check the mailbox. Nestled among bills and flyers was a single white envelope, postmarked 3 days earlier from a town in Ohio she didn't recognize. There was no return address. The front bore only her name, written in deep blue ink with a flourish that seemed oddly familiar. Inside was a photograph, a Polaroid, slightly faded with a glossy finish. It showed Helen as a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s, standing outside a crumbling farmhouse. The edges of the photo were stained, like it had been kept somewhere damp. She didn't recognize the house or the person who had taken the photo, but she knew the image was real, because she remembered the shirt she was wearing, a mustard yellow flannel she had loved and lost years ago. Beneath the photo was a note scribbled in tight cursive on thin stationery. "We're not done here. You still owe me one." Chills ran through Helen's spine. She spent the day rummaging through old journals, photo boxes, and negatives. Nothing came up. No trip to Ohio. No broken down farmhouse. No missing debts, at least none that fit this context. 3 days later, another envelope came. No return address again, but postmarked from a different Ohio town. Another Polaroid. This time, it showed Helen asleep in her current bedroom. The photo had been taken from the hallway, just outside the slightly ajar door. She recognized the floral duvet, the blue mug on her nightstand, even the open book on her chest. But Helen lived alone. She called the Goffstown police immediately. The officer who arrived took the report seriously, but found no signs of forced entry, no prints, no clues. He chalked it up to an elaborate prank and left after suggesting Helen install a security system. She did, the next day. High-end cameras, motion sensors, every window locked tight. And still, the photos came. Week by week, a new photo arrived. Always a Polaroid. Always her, sometimes captured through a window, sometimes from down the street, and once from what looked like the ceiling vent in her kitchen. Each one accompanied by short, cryptic notes. Remember the blood. He screamed your name before the end. You made it out. I didn't. The postmarks always changed, bouncing around random towns across Ohio. Helen scoured maps, trying to see if the locations formed a pattern, but they didn't. She called friends from her old newsroom days, tried to jog memories of people she might have wronged, assignments that had ended poorly, but none of it led anywhere. One evening, she decided to digitize the Polaroids. As she uploaded the high-res scans to her laptop, she noticed something strange. In every photo, the same figure appeared in the background. Sometimes, it was a silhouette behind a tree. Sometimes, a blur in a window. But it was always there, a man in a long coat and wide-brimmed hat. His face was never visible, but Helen felt a deep, visceral revulsion every time she spotted him. She began calling him the Watcher. Then came the letter that broke her. You buried me with the camera, but the film was never destroyed. Helen fell to the floor when she read it. The memory it triggered was one she had worked hard to suppress, so deeply she'd nearly erased it from her own narrative. In 1982, she had been on assignment in rural Ohio, covering the final days of a crumbling mining town before it was condemned. She'd been traveling with a photographer named Marcus Lane. They were ambushed in an abandoned house by a paranoid squatter wielding a rifle. In the chaos, Helen had escaped through the cellar, but Marcus hadn't made it out. The authorities had searched, but Marcus's body was never recovered. Helen had told them she didn't know what happened, only that they were separated during the struggle. It wasn't a full lie, but she hadn't told them about Marcus begging her not to leave as she ran, or the sharp sound behind her that might have been a final shot. Nor had she told them about grabbing Marcus's camera bag in panic and fleeing without looking back. Helen had burned the bag, or thought she had. It was easier to cope if she treated that night like it never happened. But now something, was unearthing it. That night, as thunder rolled in across the trees, Helen walked to the fireplace and threw every letter, every photo into the flames. She watched them curl and blacken, watched the Watcher disappear into smoke. Then she packed a single bag and left, driving through the storm without any destination. A week later, the new tenant of the cottage, a young freelance writer named Callie, received a piece of mail addressed to the resident. Curious, she opened it. Inside was a Polaroid of her, standing in the kitchen, drinking coffee, and beneath it a note. The camera always finds what's owed. Story 5. The Psychiatric Note. Dr. Felix Marrow was a respected psychiatrist in Albany, New York. Known for his compassionate approach and sharp mind, he had spent 3 decades building a quiet but effective private practice in a modest brick office on Warren Street. His clients ranged from anxious college students to war veterans with deep-rooted PTSD. He rarely took on more than 5 patients a day and wrote detailed notes after each session, always by hand, always filed meticulously. In February 2021, a patient named Claire Atwood was referred to him by a colleague. A 24-year-old woman with a history of dissociative episodes and long-term insomnia, Claire claimed she was being followed by a mirror version of herself, one that whispered to her from dark windows and reflective surfaces. During their first session, Claire sat rigidly in the leather chair, her hands clenched in her lap. "She copies everything I do," she said softly. Except she smiles, all the time. But it's not my smile. It's wider. Dr. Marrow nodded and jotted down his usual observations. Mild delusion, probable sleep deprivation, potential trauma trigger. He recommended melatonin and scheduled her for weekly therapy. Claire returned the following Tuesday with dark circles under her eyes and scratches on her arms. "She's getting closer," she said. "I saw her behind me in the mirror at the grocery store. When I turned around, nothing was there, but I could hear her breathing." As the weeks passed, Claire's stories grew more vivid and structured. Her mirror self had a name, Clara, and according to Claire, she had started talking back. She claimed Clara was trying to replace her, to step into her life from the other side. It was textbook dissociative psychosis, but the consistency of the narrative unsettled Dr. Marrow more than he liked to admit. He began keeping a separate notebook just for Claire. A private record kept locked in his desk drawer. Something about her made him feel like the normal clinical distance wasn't enough. On March 19th, Claire didn't show up for her appointment. No call, no text. When Dr. Marrow phoned her emergency contact, the line was disconnected. He considered reporting her missing, but she'd always been an independent adult. No signs of self-harm, no actionable threat. 2 days later, a package arrived at his office. There was no return address. Inside was a manila envelope containing a single sheet of paper and a USB drive. The sheet was from a psychiatric intake form, the kind used in mental institutions. It was labeled Patient, Dr. Felix Marrow. Date of admission, March 21st, 1997. Diagnosis, paranoid delusional disorder. Facility, Marrow Creek Psychiatric Hospital. He stared at the form, his own name, his handwriting too, but distorted, slanted like a frantic version of his usual style. The form was stamped and signed. Dr. Marrow had never been committed, never even treated for psychiatric illness. He'd worked steadily since graduating. This form had to be fake. He opened the USB drive. It contained a single audio file labeled Initial Session, Patient Fort 132. The file crackled to life. A soft voice, female. Patient states she is not Claire Atwood, refuses to acknowledge diagnosis of identity delusion, believes she is a licensed psychiatrist named Felix Marrow. Dr. Marrow's blood ran cold. The voice was familiar. It was his own voice. But the tone was wrong, clinical, detached, like someone impersonating him with eerie precision. The voice continued. Claims to have decades of psychiatric experience. No records confirm her medical license. Believes patients are inserting memories into her mind. Severe resistance to reality. He shut the laptop. His chest tightened. This was a hoax. It had to be. Someone was gaslighting him, manipulating his mind with a long con. But who? Claire? A disgruntled former patient? He went straight to the county records office and requested a check on Marrow Creek Psychiatric Hospital. No such facility existed in New York State. Not now. Not ever. His reflection caught his eye in the lobby window as he walked out. For a second, just a second, he swore the reflection didn't move when he did, that it turned its head a split second later, that it smiled faintly, almost with pity. At home, he tore through his file cabinet, looking for Claire's paperwork, referrals, session notes, audio logs. Her file was gone. In its place, a manila folder with his own name written in uneven capital letters. Inside were pages of notes, therapy sessions supposedly between himself and someone named Dr. Clara Meadows. In the transcripts, he was the patient, the delusional one, the one who believed he was a doctor after suffering a psychotic break in the late 90s. He slammed the drawer shut, breathing heavily. His hands trembled. He looked down at his left wrist and noticed faint scarring, old puncture marks, like IV lines. But he didn't remember ever being hospitalized, ever. He called the colleague who had referred Claire, Dr. Hadley. But the number was no longer in service. His email bounced back. The clinic's website was gone. The next morning, the brass plaque outside his office that had read Dr. Felix Marrow Psychiatry was missing. In its place, a plain sign, vacant. He called the landlord. "This suite hasn't been rented in years," the man replied. "I don't know who you are." That night, unable to sleep, he returned to the audio file and played it again, this time with headphones. Near the end, after the diagnosis and notes, came a whisper, barely audible under the surface hum. "Wake up, Felix. She's almost done replacing you." His laptop flickered and shut down. The next morning, he looked in the bathroom mirror and didn't see himself. The man looking back wore his face, but with subtle wrongness. The hair slightly longer, the posture more hunched, and the smile too wide, a crack of perfect white teeth. Behind that smile, Felix could feel something pressing forward, like a presence waiting for its turn. As he staggered back from the mirror, a final sheet of paper fluttered from beneath the bathroom door. It was another psychiatric note. Patient no longer responsive. Personality integration, 94%. Clara M. recommends full transition by end of week. Terminate Felix host if residual resistance continues. It was signed, Dr. Clara Meadows. Sometimes, the dead don't stay silent. Whether it's grief opening strange doors or something darker slipping through the cracks. These letters remind us that words carry weight, even beyond the grave. If these stories unsettled you, remember, for every tale that's shared, there are countless others still hidden in drawers, burned in fireplaces, or left to rot in mailboxes never opened. Thanks for watching. Keep your eyes open, your mailbox closed, and whatever you do, don't write back.